You weren't supposed to hear this. The Hartwell family buried the truth a century ago, and every man who tried to dig it up either vanished or lost his mind. But since you're here, listening, I'm going to tell you what they did, and why it still matters. 5 brides, all young, all vibrant, all standing at the altar thinking they had married into power. Within months, every single one was gone, locked away in asylums, babbling to mirrors, tearing at the walls like something was inside them. The official records call it a tragic string of nervous breakdowns. But that's a lie. And the lie is the first key. You see, the Hartwell mansion on Beacon Hill wasn't just a house. It was a device. Not electrical, not mechanical, older than both. Built into the geometry of its walls, its corridors, and its cursed East Wing bedroom was a system of influence so precise it could dismantle a human mind piece by piece. Without a single hand touching them. Most men think control comes from chains, from orders, from brute force. But the elites, the real ones, know the greatest control is invisible. You don't break your target's will. You convince them it's their own thoughts unraveling. You let them look into a mirror and see, not themselves, but the part of themselves you want to destroy. Jeremiah Hartwell wasn't just a wealthy industrialist. He was a student of these systems. And he had a purpose for his wives that went far beyond marriage. The first signs were subtle. She lingers too long at her reflection. She listens to spaces that have no sound. She starts repeating phrases no one remembers saying. Then, isolation. The mind folds in on itself. And finally, compliance. Understand this. What happened in that house was not a curse. It was a program. And once you recognize the structure, you'll start seeing it in more places than you want to. We'll start with the first. B. October sunlight spilled over Millbrook's Valley like a blessing that morning, but for Margaret Dunlap, it felt like ceremony, as if the whole town had been staged just for her arrival. The carriage wheels clattered over cobblestone, drawing every pair of eyes toward the polished black horses, the velvet drapes, and the man beside her. Jeremiah Hartwell had a way of making silence feel like approval. Even when he said nothing, you felt you'd pleased him. He didn't need to touch your hand to make you feel chosen. That was the first thing people misunderstood about him. His power wasn't in what he said, but in the way he let you speak until you started to reveal too much. The gates of the mansion were already open. Not wide, just enough. A precise invitation. Margaret would later remember the way the wrought iron caught the sun and sent a thin beam of light straight into her eyes as they passed. She blinked, looked away, and when her vision cleared, she was staring directly at the East Wing windows. And someone, or something, was staring back. She told herself it was a trick of the glass, maybe her own reflection distorted by distance, but the figure didn't move when she did. It only tilted its head as if measuring her. Then it was gone. Inside, the air was cool, scented faintly with lavender. The staff's smiles were perfectly balanced between warmth and distance. The walls were hung with oil portraits, faces Margaret did not recognize, and every frame held glass polish to such a high sheen that she saw herself 100 times before she even reached the grand staircase. Jeremiah's hand brushed her lower back. "The East Wing will be yours," he said, and the way he said yours sounded less like a gift and more like a claim. The master bedroom was vast, the bed carved from cherry wood, the wallpaper a pale cream laced with gold. But what caught her was the M. The first week in the East Wing passed without incident. Margaret wrote letters home, hosted polite teas, and learned the rhythms of the staff. But she could not shake the feeling that the house knew her footsteps, that it listened. She began waking before dawn, not because she wanted to, but because the silence seemed charged. She would stand at the bedroom's tall windows, staring down at the mist that clung to the gardens, feeling as though the mist was staring back. The mirror on the far wall had become part of her mornings. At first, it was vanity, making sure her hair was smooth before Jeremiah saw her at breakfast. But soon it was something else. She caught herself pausing, leaning closer, her breath fogging the glass. Sometimes she thought she saw movement behind her reflection, the faintest ripple like water disturbed by a pebble dot one evening. While Jeremiah was away on business in Pittsburgh, she heard footsteps in the hall outside her door. Slow, deliberate. She opened the door to find the corridor empty, but the mirror inside the bedroom showed something different. In its reflection, a woman stood at the far end of the hall, half in shadow, her face turned toward Margaret Dot. The figure did not move. Margaret turned to look directly. Nothing there. Back to the mirror, gone Dot. She told herself she was tired, but the next morning a new mark had appeared on the wall behind the vanity table. A faint vertical line, no longer than her finger, as if the wallpaper had been sliced with a blade. Dot. When she asked the housekeeper about it, the woman's face tightened. Old houses settle, Mrs. Hartwell. The walls change. She left the room before Margaret could press further. Dot. That night, Margaret dreamed she was inside the mirror. The bedroom was reversed, wrong in subtle ways. The bed facing the opposite wall, the windows opening onto a street she had never seen. By the second month, Margaret had learned something no one had told her. The East Wing had its own climate. The air stayed a few degrees cooler than the rest of the house, no matter the fire in the grate. The light was different, too. Softer in the morning, sharper at night, like moonlight refracted through ice. Jeremiah never explained it. He never had to. His presence in the room was brief, precise. A glance at the fireplace, a hand brushing along the vanity's polished wood, his eyes lingering on the mirror before resting on her. Not her face. Her posture. Margaret began to notice that he asked strange questions over breakfast. How did you sleep? But not as a husband might ask. Did you dream? And when she hesitated, his gaze sharpened, like a teacher waiting for the correct answer. What did you see in the glass? And if she said nothing, his fork paused midair, and his expression shifted almost imperceptibly toward disappointment. The marks on the wall grew. Thin, straight, deliberate. She started keeping track, scratching tiny numbers in the back of her dresser drawer. One morning she found a mark had appeared on the opposite wall, directly behind where she sat at the vanity. Margaret tried moving the mirror to another part of the room. When she returned later that day, the staff had put it back exactly where it had been. No one admitted to touching it. One afternoon, alone in the bedroom, she tested a thought. She whispered into the mirror, I know you're listening. The glass trembled. Just a fraction, as if a cart had passed outside. But there was no sound, no vibration in the floorboards. She leaned closer. Her reflection's lips didn't quite match her own. The voice that came back was hers, but not. Don't tell him. She stumbled back, heart racing. The fire had gone cold, though she hadn't noticed it dimming. That night, Jeremiah returned. It started with words, short and clipped, like messages scratched on the underside of a desk. At first, they came in her voice, her own reflection mouthing things her mind insisted she hadn't said. Don't eat the bread. The key is not in the drawer. He is counting the nights. Margaret stopped combing her hair in the mornings. Every time she looked into the glass, her reflection seemed eager, like it was waiting for her to ask the wrong question. One evening, while Jeremiah was away, the mirror took control entirely. She didn't see herself this time. She saw the east wing from a higher angle, as though standing on the ceiling beams. The bed was empty. The walls looked closer together, and in the center of the room was a black shape, hunched and faceless, tracing the same marks she'd been counting. 1, 2, 3. Her breath fogged the glass. She reached out, fingertips touching the surface. Warm, not cool like before. The black shape turned its head. It had no features, yet she knew it was looking at her. A voice, not hers, not Jeremiah's, came through like breath through dry reeds. He built this place for them, not for you. The view shattered into shards of her own reflection, all at slightly different angles, all smiling when she wasn't. That night, Jeremiah returned smelling faintly of iron. He didn't ask about her day. He didn't need to. He only touched her shoulder as he passed, murmuring, "You've seen something. Good." In bed, she tried to keep her eyes closed until sleep took her. But the room felt different, like the walls had shifted closer, the ceiling lowered an inch, and the air was thick with the scent of damp stone. Somewhere in the dark, something tapped 3 times. Not on the door. On the mirror. She pulled the covers over her head, pretending not to hear. But the voice came anyway, whispering in a way that seemed to slip inside her chest. "It's not you they want. It's what you can open." The next morning, Margaret didn't avoid the mirror. She sat in front of it, brushing her hair with slow, deliberate strokes, like she was daring it to speak first. It did. "You don't belong here. She almost laughed. "I know." The reflection leaned closer, though she hadn't moved. Its lips barely moved, but the words were crisp, intimate, and meant only for her. "I can take you away from him. For a moment, the house's air, always heavy and damp, seemed lighter. Her pulse quickened. She hated herself for it, but she whispered, "How?" The glass rippled faintly, as though water lay just beneath the surface. "There's a door you cannot see until you stand where the sun never touches. A door that only opens for the one who knows its name. She frowned. "And you'll tell me the name?" The reflection smiled. Not her smile, sharper, more certain. "If you bring me something first." "What?" "The box he keeps under the 3rd floorboards. It's not locked. Not yet. Margaret hesitated. She knew which floorboard it meant. The one Jeremiah stepped over every time he crossed the study, as if not to disturb whatever lay beneath. "If you touch it before he moves it," the voice said, "you'll hear them all. And once you hear them, you can't be kept here." "Who's them?" she asked. The reflection tilted its head, eyes gleaming like they'd just heard a secret joke. "The ones who built him." Behind her. She thought she heard footsteps. Jeremiah's, slow and deliberate, but when she turned, the hallway was empty. She faced the mirror again, but it was just her reflection now, perfectly ordinary, perfectly hers. Except her eyes were still gleaming. Margaret waited until Jeremiah's boots clicked out the front door and faded into the fog. She didn't run. Running made noise, and this house seemed to drink in silence like it was feeding on it. She slipped into the study, a narrow, high-ceilinged room where the windows never quite let in enough light. The 3rd floorboard from the hearth waited, untouched for years. Her hands trembled as she pressed her fingers into the seam. It came up easier than she expected. Beneath, a small wooden box lay in a bed of dust, its surface carved with symbols she didn't recognize. The wood was darker than walnut, slick to the touch, almost damp. The moment she lifted it, the house exhaled. She heard it, a low, shuddering sigh that didn't come from the walls, but from under them. And then, voices. They weren't speaking to her exactly, but around her, through her. Fragments of sentences tangled together, desperate and angry. "He wears us. Not a man, not anymore. We built him, but he kept the bones. Don't touch the mirror when it's open." Her heart hammered. She nearly dropped the box. The air was wrong now, thick as if she were breathing through cloth. Then, a knock. Not at the front door. This was from inside the box. It came again, louder, faster, until it felt like something inside was trying to punch its way out. Margaret stumbled back, but the mirror's voice slithered from the hallway behind her. "Now you've heard them. Now you can leave. She turned, clutching the box to her chest. The mirror stood in the shadows, reflecting her not as she was, but as she would be if she never left. Skin sagging, eyes dim, hair like cobweb. It smiled. "Unless you wait too long. From somewhere deep in the floor, something scratched at the wood. Margaret slammed the floorboard back into place, but the sound of it shutting felt hollow, like the wood didn't want to close. She set the box on the desk, her hands aching from gripping it too tightly. The knocking inside had stopped. That somehow felt worse. The mirror's reflection still lingered in her mind. The sagging face, the dim eyes. She didn't know whether it was a warning or a promise. "Open it," a voice whispered. It wasn't the same as before. This one was inside her skull, brushing against her thoughts like a moth against glass. She shook her head. No, I'm not." The voice grew louder, silkier. "It's not a box. It's a key, and you've already turned it." Margaret felt the weight of her own life pressing against her. If she opened it, maybe she'd know the truth about Jeremiah, about the voices, about the sighing house. If she left it closed, maybe she could still walk away. But could she? Would the house even let her? She glanced toward the hallway. The front door was visible from here. So close, she could almost believe she might make it. The mirror called from the shadows again. "You're thinking in straight lines. The house doesn't have any." Her heart skittered. She realized, with a slow, dawning terror, that every move she made, standing, breathing, thinking, felt like it had been rehearsed before she even stepped inside. And if that was true, then there was no choice to make. She was already in the middle of a decision someone else had written. The box pulsed, just once, like a heartbeat. Her fingers moved before her mind agreed. The latch gave a soft click that echoed far louder in her ears than it should have. The lid creaked open. There was no light inside. No objects, no letters, no trinkets. Only darkness. But it wasn't empty. The air above the open box bent slightly, like heat rising from pavement. Then it moved. A slow, deliberate inhale. Margaret froze as the darkness reached for her, not with hands, but with thoughts. They slid under her skin, rearranging her, tugging at memories that didn't belong to her at all. She saw, as if through someone else's eyes, the parlor where she now stood, but the wallpaper was different, the furniture older, the air heavier. A man in the vision, tall, gaunt, wearing an ash-colored coat, leaned over a child in the rocking chair. The child's eyes were sewn shut, black thread glistening in the lamplight. The man whispered something, and Margaret heard it with her whole body. "The living are only dreams we haven't woken from yet." She tore herself from the vision, but the darkness followed, folding into her mind like ink into water. She stumbled back, slamming the lid shut. The box didn't move this time, but she could still feel it in her, as though a part of her mind had been replaced with someone else's thoughts. And in those thoughts was a single, impossible certainty. She hadn't just opened the box. The box had opened her. The air in the room felt different now, heavier, like a storm was crouching in the corners, waiting to strike. Margaret pressed her palm to the doorframe, but the wood was warm, almost pulsing. She tried the hallway. It wasn't there. Where the corridor should have stretched into shadows, there was only another room, one she'd never seen before. The ceiling sloped unnaturally low. The walls were papered in a faded floral print that curled at the edges like burnt parchment. A grandfather clock stood against the far wall, its pendulum swinging too fast, ticking out a rhythm that didn't match time at all. Margaret stepped back into the parlor, but it too had changed. The windows were gone. The fireplace was no longer bricked up. Now it yawned open, black and breathing. A low groan rolled through the floorboards beneath her feet, not the sound of settling wood, but the slow stretch of something alive. She clutched her skirt, her heartbeat loud in her ears. The box still sat on the table, lid shut, perfectly still. Yet she knew, without reason, without proof, that the house was moving around her because of it. Walls shifting, rooms reordering, her path to the outside being rewritten. She turned again, desperate to find the front door. But instead, she was met with a narrow stairwell climbing into darkness. And from the top step, she heard it. The voice from the vision, soft as a breath against her ear. "Upstairs, Margaret. There's something you've forgotten." The staircase complained under her weight, each step bending as though it might splinter and swallow her foot whole. The air grew colder with every rise, the shadows stretching longer, deeper, until she could no longer see where the steps ended. Halfway up, the voice returned. Not a whisper this time, but a measured murmur, like someone reading from a letter. "You promised, Margaret. You swore you'd never leave me here." Her breath caught. She didn't know that voice. Or she thought she didn't. At the top of the stairs, a hallway waited, but not the cramped corridor she remembered from childhood visits. This one was wider, lined with closed doors on both sides, each marked by a small brass number, like rooms in a boarding house. The first door on her left was slightly ajar. She hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside was a bedroom, but not hers, not anyone's she knew. The bed was neatly made, the curtains drawn. A single object sat on the nightstand, a porcelain music box in the shape of a swan. She reached for it, and the moment her fingers touched it, the lid sprang open. A lullaby spilled out. Not the sweet tinkling sound of a toy, but the deep, aching notes of a church organ. And over the music came the scrape of a chair across the floor behind her. She turned. There was a man sitting in the far corner, his face hidden in shadow, his body still except for the slow tap of one boot against the floorboards. "Margaret," he said. It wasn't a greeting. It was a reminder. Margaret's pulse hammered. The man didn't move toward her. He didn't need to. His voice carried like smoke, thin, but filling every corner of the room. "You left her in the water." She blinked. "What?" "You were 10. The river was high that spring. She asked you to hold her hand. You let go." Her throat tightened. The memory, if it was a memory, surged like ice water in her veins. She had been by the river as a child, but there had been no other girl. No drowning, no screams. "You're lying," she said, though the words came out as a whisper. The man leaned forward, just enough for the light to catch his face. His skin looked almost waxen, like a mask, but his eyes were unmistakable. They were hers. "No," he said. "I'm remembering for you." Her knees weakened, and she stumbled back against the bed. The swan music box kept playing that hollow, aching tune, now slower, like it was winding down. "You came here to find out who you are," the man continued, "but you don't want the answer. The house knows that. It's been patient. It's been feeding you scraps for years. Dreams, fragments, little accidents that weren't accidents." Margaret swallowed hard. "What are you?" He smiled without warmth. "I'm the part of you the world buried, and you've just dug me up." The door slammed shut behind her without anyone touching it. Margaret lunged for the door, wrenching the handle, but it wouldn't turn. The wood under her fingers felt warm, breathing, and when she yanked her hand away, her palm was wet with something dark. Behind her, the man's chair was empty. She turned, heart pounding, and froze. The room was gone. In its place stretched a narrow hallway lined with walls that shifted, photographs sliding into place on their own, frames tilting at impossible angles. Each picture was of her, but not the Margaret she remembered being. In one, she was a little girl standing beside the river, holding another child's hand, the face blurred, water curling around their legs. In another, she was older, standing in the attic of this very house, her mouth open mid-scream, while something in the shadows pulled at her hair. The hallway floor rippled like water, each step she took sending distortions down its length. The Swan music box was still playing, though it seemed to be coming from inside her head now, notes bending and stretching until they sounded more like voices. She ran. The corridor shifted with her, stretching, folding, contracting. A door appeared at the far end. She sprinted toward it, her breath ragged, but the closer she got, the further away it seemed. The walls pressed in, narrowing until her shoulders brushed the frames, the glass cool against her skin. One photograph caught her eye. She wasn't in it. Instead, it showed the man, sitting exactly where she'd first seen him. Only now. There was something in his lap. A music box, the exact one she'd wound herself. And it was open. The Swan's head was slowly turning toward the camera. Her lungs burned, each gasp scraping her throat raw. The door loomed ahead now, closer than it had ever been. She didn't think. She just threw herself at it, fingers clawing for the knob. It turned this time, cold and slick, and she stumbled through, straight into a summer afternoon she hadn't lived in over 30 years. The smell hit her first. River water, thick and metallic, with the faint sweetness of rotting reeds. Sunlight fractured across the rippling surface, bright enough to make her squint. Her shoes sank into the familiar mud of the bank. She knew this place. She knew it. Downstream, a child was laughing. Margaret's knees locked. The laughter wasn't a sound she'd heard in decades, yet it struck her like lightning, sharp, unshakable, and cruel in its clarity. She turned her head slowly, afraid to see what her mind already knew. 2 children stood at the water's edge, herself at age 8 and the other. The blurred face was no longer blurred. It was a boy, pale, thin, hair the color of wet straw, eyes as dark as the river. His hand was in hers, and both of them were wet to the waist. The boy's smile was wrong, not the open joy of play, but a frozen, knowing smirk. Margaret's heart dropped into her stomach. She remembered now, not just the game, but the scream that followed, the water pulling him under, her own hands letting go. A shadow fell over them, stretching from the trees behind. The man from the chair, watching. His voice was quiet but carried, curling like smoke into her ears. "Now," he said, "do you see?" The music box began to play again, and this time she felt the Swan's turning head behind her. The melody twisted, sour and sweet, as if the music itself had grown teeth. Margaret's breath caught when the porcelain swan, once a delicate trinket, began to grow before her eyes. Cracks splintered its smooth surface, and the tiny head stretched upward, curving into a neck thick as a tree trunk. Its glass eyes turned blood red, reflecting the dark river and the boy's frozen smirk. The swan wasn't a toy anymore. It was a creature born from the house's dark heart, an ancient sentinel, shaped by forgotten horrors. Margaret's knees buckled. The creature advanced with a terrible grace, each step silent but heavy enough to sink into the mud. The river's edge rippled unnaturally, the water curling around the swan's monstrous feet like smoke. The boy's smile widened, lips parting to reveal teeth sharper than any child's. "You can't leave," he whispered, voice echoing like a death knell. She tried to scream, but the sound was swallowed by the music's relentless tide. The swan reached for her, with a wing tipped in jagged porcelain blades, cold as the grave. Margaret stumbled back into the water, the chill biting through her clothes and skin. The current was stronger than memory, pulling her down into the murky depths. As the world darkened, she heard the man's voice one last time, a promise and a curse intertwined. The living are only dreams we haven't woken from yet. Darkness engulfed her like a suffocating shroud. But Margaret did not drown. Instead, she awoke, gasping, drenched, in a room that was both familiar and impossibly wrong. Walls dripped with water, paint bubbling like skin over unseen wounds. The air was thick with the scent of decay and cold iron. The windows were black mirrors, reflecting nothing but endless voids. She tried to stand, but her limbs felt heavy, disconnected, as if she were a marionette with frayed strings. From the shadows, a voice, low, commanding, and cruel, echoed through the room. "You're not lost, Margaret. You're home." The walls pulsed rhythmically, as though the house itself had a heartbeat, and with each pulse, the room shifted, folding inward and outward, like a living organism, breathing through time. A gallery of portraits appeared, each face more distorted than the last. Faces of women, wives, brides, each one a faded ghost of those who had come before. Their eyes followed her, hollow and accusing. "You carry their madness," the voice continued, "because this house does not forget. It feeds on your fear, your secrets. Your refusal to remember is its fuel." Margaret's reflection flickered in a nearby mirror, fractured and multiplying, each shard showing a different version of herself. Some smiling, others twisted in silent screams. Reality was no longer a place, but a prison constructed from her mind, and the house was the warden. The truth was simple and terrible. The Hartwell mansion was never just a home. It was a mechanism, a machine designed to break and remake the souls within its walls. And now, it had claimed her. The darkness thickened, coiling around her like smoke. From the depths emerged the man, no longer a shadow, but fully formed, stepping from the void with a cold, measured grace. His eyes bored into hers, unblinking, carrying the weight of decades of secrets. "Do you know why this house chooses its brides, Margaret?" he asked, voice steady yet laced with menace. She swallowed hard, but found no words. "It's not madness that consumes them. It's purpose." He gestured to the twisted portraits lining the walls, women whose eyes begged for release. "The Hartwell family isn't cursed. It's controlled. Every bride, every wife, every shattered mind. Part of a cycle, an unholy experiment designed to unlock something ancient, something powerful." Margaret felt the truth slam into her like a fist. The mansion was not just a home or prison. It was a crucible for breaking souls and reshaping them into weapons of influence and control. "And Jeremiah?" she whispered. "He is both the key and the lock." The man stepped closer, voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. "You must decide, Margaret. Succumb to the house and become its next masterpiece. Or fight back, knowing that resistance comes at a price far darker than you can imagine." Her fractured reflections shimmered in the mirror once more, each one a path she could take. This was no longer a game. This was war. The air crackled with tension as Margaret's resolve hardened. No longer a passive prisoner, she stepped forward, eyes blazing with the fire of defiance. The house seemed to shudder, its breathing quickening, walls creaking like bones under pressure. The portraits twisted, their ghostly faces sneering, warning, begging. But Margaret would not break again. She tore her reflection from the fractured mirror, shattering the glass into countless shards that scattered like stars across the floor. Each fragment sparked and hissed, as if releasing trapped souls in tiny explosions of light. A roar exploded through the mansion, the voice of Jeremiah, part man, part monster, echoing from the depths below. "You cannot escape what you are." Margaret's hands trembled, but did not falter. She knew the truth now. This house was a living instrument of control, an ancient weapon forged to imprison minds and bend wills. But weapons could be turned. Chains could be broken. Her mind became a battlefield where memory clashed with manipulation. Sanity waged war against madness. Every step forward was a fight to reclaim herself. Every breath a rebellion against the house's grip. The mirrors cracked again, this time splintering open doorways to forgotten pasts and unseen futures. Margaret would walk through them all, or be consumed forever. Beneath the grandeur of the Hartwell mansion lay a secret chamber, a hidden sanctum where Jeremiah Hartwell's darkest ambitions took form. This was no ordinary basement. The air hung heavy with the scent of chemicals, old parchment, and something metallic, like dried blood. Scattered across rough wooden tables were journals, sketches, and brittle letters that revealed a chilling truth. Jeremiah was no mere industrialist. He was a man obsessed with control, not just of iron and steel, but of the human mind itself. The journals described experiments in isolation, sensory manipulation, and psychological conditioning. Methods so ruthless, they shattered minds without leaving a trace. He had studied ancient texts on occult practices, blending science with superstition, to forge a system designed to break will and remake identity. The mansion was his laboratory, the brides his subjects. A map etched on a stained parchment revealed an underground network of tunnels and chambers, pulsing with an eerie blue glow, a source of power Jeremiah sought to harness for his own shadowed purposes. The lines between technology and ritual blurred here. Arcane symbols intertwined with mechanical diagrams hinted at forces far older and darker than anyone dared imagine. This was the heart of the house's madness, the machine behind the mask. And Jeremiah's legacy was not one of tragedy, but of calculated terror. A family built on manipulation, deception, and the relentless pursuit of power through madness. The chamber's cold blue light flickered, casting grotesque shadows that danced like specters on the walls. Margaret stood alone at the heart of the mansion's dark machine, the epicenter of a nightmare, centuries in the making. Her body ached, her mind frayed to its limits, but her eyes burned with clarity no madness could extinguish. This was the moment. To step away and surrender, becoming just another broken bride, lost in the endless maze. Or to shatter the cycle, to claim the power the house tried to deny her. The music box's haunting lullaby echoed softly, now a distant whisper beneath the pounding of her heart. She reached out, fingers trembling, and touched the cold steel of the ritual device at the room's center. A fusion of ancient symbols and modern science, the true engine of control. Visions flooded her mind, faces of women she never met, their pain and fury bleeding into hers. The merciless calculations of Jeremiah's obsessions, the house itself alive, hungry for dominion over soul and sanity. With a roar born from every shattered memory and every stolen year, Margaret wrenched the device free. And the mansion convulsed, walls groaning, glass shattering, light fracturing into 1,000 shards. The oppressive weight lifted, replaced by a fierce, raw freedom. But freedom came with a price. As the house crumbled around her, Margaret knew the truth she carried now would haunt her forever. the knowledge that some darkness can be broken, but never destroyed, and that the real battle was only just beginning.